Welcome to the debut episode of Podcana, a podcast about Disney's Lorcana, a new TCG. I am Matt DeMarco, aka Flake. I'm joined by Brendan Patrick, my co-host, and on this show, we bring you all the news, headlines, and strategies about Lorcana. On our first episode, we're going to go ahead and dig into everything that we know up to now about the game. What is coming? What are the dates that we need to take note of? What do the cards look like? Some of the strategies, the product, all that gets looked at on this episode of Podcana. All right, well, Brendan, you and I have tons of experience when it comes to card games. Lorcana is something that you and I have been very excited about, and I just want to talk a little bit first. First of all, how are you doing, buddy? That's the number one question.
Doing good, doing great. I'm actually about like 2 weeks out from a marathon, my first marathon. It's probably like 3.5, to be honest. But anyway, that's like the worst time. It's just like right when you ramp up to the highest mileage, and it's just kind of a beat down. So I'm excited to start my what we call a taper. You kind of stop running and then run my marathon and be finished with that, to be honest.
Yeah, you invited me to that marathon, and I believe I said it was a reluctant, sure, I'll see. I can honestly say I did not see. Possibly because I don't like the way that you're talking about it is like, okay, now we're like approaching that like tough spot about running all these miles. And I have so much respect for you because I know that you mentioned to me in previous podcasts and discussions that we've had where you said like running is the one thing I hate the most. So we're going to do that. You got to slap some respect on that.
Yeah. How have you been? How's it up there in Canada?
It's good, dude. I'm a little under the weather. We're on the recovery process right now, but I would be remiss if I did not say that we have to get this podcast underway. I think I'm just chomping at the bit to talk about this, so I figured let's just buckle down. We're loaded with green tea and honey, and a lot of Tylenol cold and sinus. That has basically been my my nutrition for the past 2 days. But we're good to go, man.
100%. Yeah, I mean, well, let's talk about this product. I just want to hit this from like 10,000 feet real quick too. So we see the product photo. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the image. But basically, you know, Lorcana came out with their product display, like the multiple things they'll be offering on launch. And I just want to mention, it looks like when I see this image and I see this diverse set of products and I see the packaging, what it tells me is that Ravensburger, or I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, they're doing it right. Like this looks serious. Like this is a well executed and calculated launch. And I'm pretty pumped after seeing this photo.
Well, that's like the first, you know, like you mentioned, like 10,000 foot view, which is essentially what we get because this image that we're seeing here is of all the products that are currently leaked and released. You have the starter packs, you have the gift sets and all that. And we're going to dig into precisely what all those things are in just a moment. But again, 10,000 bird's eye view here is that it looks legit. And it's easy to say that because it's Disney, but at the same time, there's a lot of other companies that kind of just sort of throw their hat in the ring when it comes to TCGs. But it's not just like, oh, here are the cards, you can collect them, have fun. It's like, here are the different ways and avenues that you can explore the game, different sort of points of entry as well. So it looks like Disney, but it also looks like a card game. Like this is something that you would see on other established TCGs that are out there. If they're saying, hey, here's our new product launch for something big, this is kind of what you would see in terms of what they would offer.
On top of that, this does not look like set one for a TCG. So a lot of TCGs will use their first set as sort of a proof of concept. They will test the market, usually just coming out with a booster box, booster packs, you know, just like really standard stuff. It's their alpha set. This looks like set 4, set 5. This looks like we've been in a few years into the game. Like it's so well planned, and it shows that they're setting themselves up to be successful. Like they genuinely believe in this product. I mean, it's being released in multiple languages, which we'll talk about. It's going to be, you know, supported with organized play in multiple regions. Like you don't see that when TCG first dips its toes in the water. No,
they, like you mentioned, oftentimes I think that TCGs want to sort of, again, like you mentioned, just dip their toe in the water and test the climate and see if it's palatable. I think that when you're putting this much work and this many options out there right from the get-go, that means that there's confidence behind the product. And with confidence, you can suspect that there's a deep level of gameplay. And yeah, it's Disney. They'll have, you know, infinite or near, seemingly infinite amount of intellectual property that they can dig into in order to create content. It's not that. I think that if you're putting out this much stuff it's because the next set, chapter 2, is gonna be like, we have concepts to do all this kind of stuff for chapter 2. We'll have a gift set for chapter 2. We'll have a myriad of different starter decks for chapter 2, and they'll feel different, etc. So we should also mention that that's sort of like the grand scheme of what the product is going to look like. It's a bird's eye view, as we mentioned. But I do want to kind of I want to create a little tradition here on the show, you and I, Brendan. I want to open us up with the Elsa icebreaker question. And I think that this is something that our viewers can also submit as a nice little show opener, something to sort of get the discussion rolling. And I want to ask you, this is our Elsa icebreaker. What's your favorite Disney movie?
So my favorite Disney movie is it's definitely going to be a callback to nostalgia. So I got to tell a little story around this, a short one, but you need context when it comes to Disney, and you're my age, right? You're going into your 30s or so.
Oh, you're beautiful. I love you.
Yeah. So basically, my most of my experience with Disney movies was I would go to my grandparents. They owned like a vineyard out in West California. And we used to travel there all the time. Like we had a really good relationship. We'd go up to their vineyard and I would hang out there as a kid, drive ATVs, all that stuff. But back then we had VHS, and the only movies we had there were Disney movies. And I have to tell you, I probably watched Robin Hood and The Jungle Book probably 100 to 200 times each. And if you asked me, gun to my head, what is your favorite movie? I couldn't tell you. But maybe Robin Hood edges out Jungle Book. I just think they're both incredible. I watched them a million times when I was a kid. Absolutely love those movies. But I'm pretty pumped as we're seeing the spoiler of Robin Hood himself in the color blue, which is my favorite color in most TCGs.
Yeah, I know exactly what blue means in a lot of these, especially since the fact that you're that type of player in most other card games, and that's kind of what worries me. And what's cool is that blue is actually called steel, which is interesting too. So that's a pretty badass way to kind of indoctrinate some of the different classes or affiliations of the different cards. We'll dig into that a little bit later. But that's not bad. I mean, you're going way back, because Robin Hood and Jungle Book, man, those were like in the 60s, 70s?
OG, those were the ones where they actually used to draw it by hand, all of that. But if I'm going back to the ancient days, I gotta throw this question back at you, Flake. What is your favorite?
You make it sound like I was the one who drew them. That's how old I am. That's not the case. Is it cheating if I can use Star Wars, because Star Wars is now a Disney entity? I won't do that, because I think that's cheating. But for all those who know me, I am obviously a gigantic Star Wars nerd. But if I were to choose a actual Disney movie, it's hard not to say something like The Lion King. Like, The Lion King was truly groundbreaking for what it was. It was like an animated movie that people took seriously. It had James Earl Jones in it, so there's kind of a little bit of a Star Wars-ish kind of link to it. But ultimately, I think if we're talking about animated Disney stuff, that's probably it for me. That's got to be the top tier. I would say stuff like Toy Story, etc. These are all fun. I like those, but to me, the OG of emotional connection, of sheer brilliance, it has to be The Lion King.
It's funny you say that, because I actually feel like I have a bit of childhood trauma from The Lion King. When Mufasa died, it was pretty rough for me when I was a kid. That is a tough scene in a children's movie.
Well, what a lot of people discuss is that for a lot of youth out there, that was their first exposure to an on-screen death that mattered, of a character that they cared about. And you're not bringing kids to movies to sort of explain to them what happens after you die. This was a sincere a revelation to a lot of kids out there, myself included. It was what the hell's going on here? It's shocking, and I totally get that kind of emotional turbulence that you get when you see that scene. That whole movie was so good altogether. You can change your answer if you want, by the way.
No, I'm sticking with Robin Hood. That's a classic right there.
All right, so let's get into the actual nitty-gritty of what we know so far. We gave you a little bit of a overview of what the product looks like. But what about the release date? The release date is something I think that a lot of people are very, very in tune for, very, very eager to see. And that has also that's been released as well.
Yeah, so I mean, the release date in local game stores it's going to be available in local game stores on August 18th and big box retailers on September 1st, which is great. Like, I mean, first of all, we got to really pick apart that sentence because it's very important. When they say August 18th for local game stores and they say big box retailers on September 1st, that shows that they're committed to supporting your local game store. And when companies do that, it usually means that they're interested in cultivating a organized play scene. That's honestly not something that I expected to see out of a large TCG like Lorcana when I first was exposed to the game. So this is this is amazing news for people like me and you, Flake, who are actually looking to play this in person with, at our local game stores.
Yeah, that's very adept. Like to peel that out of there, and when Disney's Lorcana, when their Twitter account mentioned, and just said, hey, this is what we're doing, and it's going to be at LGS's first. That's huge. That basically shows, like you said, that they want to support the LGS by giving them a head start to that degree, because a lot of people can just go to Walmart, Target, pick up whatever they want off the shelf. There's all kinds of blister packs that you can just peel off of the racks, no problem. But a lot of that doesn't necessarily support the LGSs. And I hope that this is something that they do moving forward for all of their releases. But it is a good sign that this is something that they want to essentially roll over into organized play, into regular tournaments. We've heard about, every store has their Friday Night Magic, or they have their weekday armories for other games and things like that. They'll go out there and they'll make sure that there are events for people to play. And I think that this is also the case, is that they want to make sure that these LGSs get a head start to support that local business. Other games, I mean, they put their product out on every shelf possible. That's a perfectly fine business venture. Obviously, you want to maximize your profits. Ultimately, it's a business. We totally understand that. But not many are going to go out there and say, we're going to put it on all the shelves, but we want to give the mom and pop stores, we want to give those local entities that support the culture of the game, that really cultivate it, that nurture it, we want to give them a head start. So that is really good news.
Mm-hmm. It's also good that it's August 18th to September 1st. That's not a very long period of time for it to be exclusive to local game stores. But as a consumer and a person that's just looking to play the card game, the big box retailers can help you because when a game is only released to local game stores, and if it has a somewhat limited release, the local game stores can sometimes affect the price of the product depending on the rules that the publisher has put in place. So I assume that on August 18th, it might be a little tight on supply, so it might be priced a bit higher. But I mean, you're looking at 2 weeks, and it's out on September 1st at big box retailers. So I think this is going to be a super accessible and successful approach to a launch.
Yeah, no, that's spot on over there. That's one of the realities of being able to sort of, MSRP is one thing, but the key letter in that is S. It's suggested, right? So they can just basically slap a price tag on it. Demand is usually the driving force for how these prices fluctuate. We've played enough card games in our life to know that on release day, based on supply, you can get screwed based off of the fact that you just didn't put your pre-order in and it's already off the shelves. And third-party markets or secondary supply can kind of get expensive after a while. But our first look at the game physically, I believe, will actually be at Gen Con.
Well, I think that's rumored. So maybe, right? So I know it's not confirmed yet, but the rumors, they look pretty convincing. So yeah, it looks like the weekend of Gen Con, you might be able to get a few booster packs, probably limited per person. I mean, definitely limited per person. They're going to put a hard limit on it. So that's exciting. And honestly, I think it only front runs the release in local game stores by about 2 weeks, but I will tell you that's probably enough to get me to fly my way down to Indianapolis, and I assume Gen Con is in Indianapolis like it always is. But yeah, get down to Gen Con and actually check that out.
Oh, big time. That's definitely a ticket. I mean, Indianapolis is not the most flashy city, but if there's a pre-release or a pre-release of Lorcana, you can bet that I'll be there. I think that is certainly on the radar. Launch of Lorcana initially will be not global, but I don't want to say pretty close because that sounds a little bit North American elitist. But at the same time, it's going to eventually be all over the world, from what I understand. But the initial release is going to be limited.
Mm-hmm. But it's really good at that, right? We're looking at US, Canada, UK, France, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, with languages in English, French, and German. So obviously, this is pretty hard on, kind of like the South American TCG audience, and in particular, Asia, right? Like Asia is usually pretty big into paper TCGs like this, and that's going to be rough. But I assume that they'll be supporting those regions pretty quickly, and I'm very excited, to be honest, to see a first edition, first time in the market, they're actually hitting the regions that they are. That's crazy. To not just release in the US, I think it shows a lot of ambition, and I'm personally very excited for that.
Yeah, this again speaks to the fact that they're just super confident in the product. It's Disney. Like Disney doesn't go. It doesn't like half-ass anything. They want to launch it, and they want to launch it into as many markets as possible. I think part of this, the limited release is, again, the publishing is going to, for the initial print runs, is going to be in English, French, and German, and then you basically drop those products in countries where those are the predominant languages, I would imagine, right, to a degree. So it's hard not to put something out in, like, say, Spanish. It's hard not to put something out eventually in any of the Asian languages. You put it in Japanese, Cantonese, something like that, because the player base for that, I mean, for other card games, a lot of the big hurrah is when it's like, oh, it's going to be available in Japan. And like that is a huge, huge sort of rallying cry for the success of a card game, is like, we're going to drop it here and it's going to be a success because, like you mentioned, they really, really love card games. And Disney IP is a very attractive IP overall.
And I might nerd out a little bit here, so I might lose some people. But if you actually look at the current state of the market for TCGs and some of the issues that they're dealing with, like printing is a massive issue. So the fact that Lorcana can come in and release in this many languages and support this many regions is actually pretty impressive. Like I've seen multiple other TCGs have to push back releases and just really struggle to get printing allocation. So this is a good sign. On top of that, we talk about Disney this, Disney that, but really the company is Ravensburger, and it's the Disney IP. And the way this stuff kind of works, to my understanding, which is a bit limited, is that like there are so many. It's a varying different level of like if how much Disney will actually be involved in something like this and how much they're actually going to support it. Because there's a lot of IPs out there that will just they'll loan their IP out to this or out to that. They don't take it very seriously. I see this like this game looks like it has serious funding behind it. It looks like it's calculated and it's set up to be successful, what we've talked about. I don't think that that's like something that's just a given. And it does look like Disney is, they want this product to actually reflect well on their brand, that's a really, really good thing for people like me and you who are actually looking to play the game.
No, big time, absolutely. Kind of leads me to kind of wonder, if this takes off and just becomes massive, what happens to other Disney associated IPs that are also card games, like Marvel Snap, for example, and other things like that? I don't think those are going away by any means. I think those are also successful in their own right. But again, like you said, this is Ravensburger. They're the ones who are taking care of this game. They're the ones who are developing, etc. And they've got Disney's IP, but they don't just give that out. It's not like, it's not like trick or treat, here's some Disney IP for you to mess around with. Like I think that they're very protective of who and what represents their brand. And if Ravensburger approached them or vice versa or whatever, and it came to fruition, I think it's because it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, so if you want an example of the opposite scenario, you can just go on your phone, go to the App Store, type in Warhammer 40K, or just Warhammer. You see a plethora of just garbage tier games sat right next to high quality games that were actually developed by real game studios that had funding. Like there's such a wide variance in the quality that you might get, but it's because that company is willing to sort of loan its IP out to anybody and kind of anything, it seems. Disney obviously at this point is not doing that, and I'm very happy to see that the game it has the ingredients it needs to be successful.
All right, so Lorcana, the products have been released in terms of what you'll be able to buy on day one, essentially, and we're going to start with the booster packs and booster boxes. Booster packs, I've got a picture of them over here. You've got Elsa, you've got Mickey Mouse, you've got Maleficent, so there's different versions that you can get, but they're all 12 card packs. And the breakdowns, this is interesting to me because this is something I wasn't prepared, like I wasn't used to in all the other TCGs I've played in the past 25 years of buying paper product, until other card games came out, such as Flesh and Blood, that jammed in 2 rare or better cards per pack, plus a guaranteed foil. I think that's something that's a new kind of trend. But Lorcana is kind of jumping on that with their booster pack breakdowns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the booster pack, we have 6 common cards, 3 uncommon cards, 2 rare, super rare, or legendary cards, and that 1 foil card. You'll see an image, if you're watching this on YouTube, of the sort of variations of the booster pack. Looks like we have 3, like Elsa, Mickey Mouse, and Maleficent, like you mentioned. But yeah, this is pretty stock standard for the distribution of a booster pack. I am happy to see that it is 1 foil card guaranteed per pack. And the reason I'm happy to see that is because when that foil is actually not guaranteed, you get into this weird scenario where people can potentially like weigh out the packs, and it makes it super annoying. So I really like it when there's a guaranteed single foil, because you get that consistency and you can buy single packs like on the market, and it's relatively like much more easier on the consumer. So I mean, it's stock standard, to be honest, Flake.
It also kind of supercharges the pack potentially. Like, you can honestly open a pack that's like, okay, you got your rare, maybe you score a legendary, and what happens if like the foil card is like another super rare foil card? So you can really hit jackpots. I'm sure that once the game comes out, you're going to see Twitter just completely inundated with people's massive pulls, none of which will be me, because that's not how that's not my luck. But the other thing I like about this is that 6 common cards, 3 uncommon cards. They're kind of cutting down the standard booster pack sort of depth of like 14 to 15 cards, and shaving away some of those common cards, and perhaps just cutting out a lot of the bulk that a lot of players are going to have. And I know that that's not necessarily perhaps what they're thinking about. When they're designing the booster packs and sort of doing the distribution, they're not saying, oh, Flake just doesn't want to fill another, Amazon box, spare Amazon box with common cards that are just going to sit in the corner. Like, that's not what they're thinking here. But at the same time, as attractive as a 15 card pack is, if it's just 3 extra commons, eventually it just kind of equates to nothing.
So we'll talk about, let's talk about that, right? Because like, what does it mean to have less cards in the pack? It does make me wonder about the support for limited play. So for draft play specifically, is this a draftable product? Is it a product that is designed to be played in both a constructed format and a limited format? Constructed is obvious, right? Constructed is just, I think they've already mentioned maybe, sort of how some of these decks are laid out. You can look at starter decks. It's a signpost. We're pretty much guaranteed to have that. But limited is not something that I've heard talked about. And I think limited adds a lot of replayability to TCGs like this. And I hope it's something that we can see in Lorcana past just sealed, right? Because sealed is pretty easy to do. You can kind of make it work in most games. But I would like to see a draftable product. That might be my personal bias towards that sort of format in a card game. But 12 card packs, they are a bit. That is a bit of a low number. It's a bit tight.
Yeah, that's definitely a worrisome thing, unless you sort of perhaps do something like, given the fact that there's color associations to the cards, and we don't know what the deck building restrictions are yet. We're very in the dark in terms about what the news was. Trust me, I've done my best to actually knock on Lorcana's door and inquire. I've made contact with them. We've established contact with Disney Lorcana, but I asked them a few questions, completely understanding that it was a total shot, like moonshot, to see if they'd actually give us anything. And they were gracious enough to reply and be very kind, and we conversed a bit, but they didn't really spill the beans in terms of much. So if it is draftable, maybe you need a 4-pack draft because of the potential restrictions, so you need more cards to sort through. But then again, if there's very restrictive color associations in terms of cards, maybe the drafting becomes exceptionally difficult.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Flake, that if there's any hope of this game being draftable at all, whether they give us guidelines or not, people are going to try to do it, and it's going to be a format that people will definitely try to make work. And like you said, if you are working with 12-card packs, you can always potentially add in that fourth pack, and then boom, you're right there. You're up there at those nearly that 50-card pack distribution. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into these starter decks, because this has got me excited, Flake. So it's on YouTube if you want to see the image here. But we have, these are starter decks of 60 cards, including 2 foil cards of the characters on the front of the package. There's 11 in-game tokens. That's a lot of tokens. 1 rule book, 1 booster pack containing the 12 randomized cards, like above. And the color distributions here are gold and black, which is amber and amethyst, green and red, which is emerald and ruby, white and blue, which is sapphire and steel. So 6 colors. That's is a bit unusual, right? I mean, that's one additional color to what you'd be used to in something like Magic the Gathering, which I do see a lot of correlations so far, because we do have a somewhat of a color pie. But we'll get into potential win conditions and things like that and how this game is actually going to play out, because I think it might be a bit different from Magic. But yeah, I'm super excited about this, Flake. I love seeing these different colors and these different identities that sort of give players a way to empathize and build the deck that they feel sort of defines them in the game. And, for me, that is pretty much off the concept of fun is sum zero, and I will be having all of it. So I will be playing blue almost surely. But not going to lie, I looked at the green card. I forget the lady's name.
That's Cruela DeVille. And
Cruella DeVille from 101
Dalmatians. Appreciate you forgetting her name. Yeah.
That is like the most control-y card I saw out of any of the releases. But anyway, Flake, your thoughts on the starter packs. I'm also really excited to see this because starter packs are great for tabletop. This is amazing for casual. This is like a sort of dual deck-esque system. This is a perfect introductory product, and I think it's a huge miss when other TCGs release without this kind of thing.
Well, if we just kind of take a look at the history of other card games, specifically, Magic is essentially just synonymous with the colors and what they identify. You can kind of say, well, green is a lot of creature-heavy, big stuff. Blue is card draw and denial. Black is destruction and manipulation, things like along those lines. And I have a feeling that that's what the identities of these different colors are going to be. I don't know if they're just going to shift. And, from the standard being blue is that kind of card draw, denial kind of, fun is a zero something kind of thing, like a net zero something. So what I appreciate about this is that the fact that you can kind of tailor what you want to do. So if you are all about a big stompy going face, you could probably find a color that has the big creatures and the bigger product. If you have stuff that just plays within the margins, that plays within the micro decisions, I'm sure you can find something along that. The fact that there's 6 colors makes me wonder where those identities are going to fall and what those extra identities are going to be. Is it, you have to split those up to a degree if they want to kind of really isolate each of these color palettes as being a particular play style. But that makes me excited because if you can, this is where players start to identify with, they might identify with characters, absolutely. But you might just identify with a playstyle and say, I just want these cards, or I just want to collect this color. I'll buy all these starter decks. I'm going to bling out this deck, and whenever new cards come in, that's what we're going to do. And I really, really like the fact that, the first rendition of these starter decks doesn't mess around. They're not just monocolored decks. They're dual decks. So they're already starting players off on a journey of understanding how the colors relate to one another, and I think that's important.
So, Flake, let's go a bit tinfoil hat. Tell me, what does 11 game tokens mean? Because that is a lot of freaking tokens.
Well, again, this is we don't know if they're like little counters, like little tokens, actual physical, beads or little coins or something. We don't know if they're actual cards that are tokens that have representation of something. 11 tokens, and the thing about it also is that it's 11 tokens around or across the board, right?
Yep. So not just like the green deck or the white deck that has these, these little soldiers or whatever. No, this is 11 tokens across the board. What does that mean? Is that hint towards maybe an alternate win condition from potentially reducing your opponent's life total to 0?
My suspicion is that 11 game tokens are going to revolve around resources that you have. I think that if you're playing a starter deck and that has 11 game tokens in them, and we're going to go down into the other products, and I'll tell you why I think this. I think that the starter decks are going to be kind of like the quick version of a game. There's a constructed version, and then there can be sort of like a toned down or quicker version with half health totals or something along those lines. I think that these are like, okay, you have 11 game tokens, and maybe each game token represents like, okay, this is 10 life, this is 5, and then you have like 5 of 1, so you can kind of just make your life total associated with what that is. And then there's other game tokens that are things like damage counters or things like that. I think that's what those have to do with. But it might also just be a matter of saying, okay, on turn 1, you get 1 resources. On turn 2, you get 2. And these are just tokens to sort of keep track of how many resources you have and how many you have left and things along those lines. But that's kind of my initial thought process. The first thing that crossed my mind wasn't necessarily like, okay, the tokens are a win condition associated thing. I thought it was more so along the lines of these are just extra things that you can just literally buy the product off the shelf and play it with somebody.
Yeah, and I do think that that's actually more likely. It's just fun to sort of sort of guess at the alternate win condition, because you look at a game like Keyforge, right? It has, because reducing your opponent's life total to 0 is just like the most standard win condition in TCGs, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Ravensburger switch it up. Not as they get rid of that win condition altogether, but there maybe is other win conditions. I also think the potential resource system is fascinating in Lorcana. It is like, if you took everything at face value, it does look like they're setting themselves up for a mana-based system or a land-based system, right? It looks like that. You have the color differentiation. You have cards cost at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like it looks like that. But I personally don't think that Ravensburger is going to use that design space. I think it's a bit outdated. I think that Magic sort of operates in that space, and I think that newer TCGs have moved away from it. They could use that, but I think that that's one of the spiciest things to sort of speculate on here is the resource system. And because we see the colors, is it going to be a land-based system? Is it going to be these lands you draw from your deck? Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Like, these could actually just be lands that get shuffled into the deck that you then play, and I honestly believe that is a detriment to the game, because if you but Flake, they're not. You want to know why? Because there's 11 and there's 60 cards in the deck. I highly doubt those are lands.
Yeah, that's a good point too. That's definitely a good point too, because you want to talk about land screw. Like, this is mana screw is going to be an epic. Of your deck. Oh my god, forget it. Like, that's not how this is going to go. Every 6th card is like actually going to help you. That's not the way that it goes. I think everybody I've spoken to from the Magic community, where you ask them something, one of those like age-old questions of like, what's the one thing about Magic you would change? The first thing that they always say is like the land system, the mana system is just, it's so bad. Like it feels so bad because there are games that just don't get played. They're just one-sided and then they're scooped. So I don't think that they're going to do that. Maybe they're doing something along the lines of like a ramp system, much like Hearthstone or other games like that, where you just get one more every turn. And perhaps one of these color-based systems is like a ramp color, that just gets you above value or gets you ahead of your opponent in terms of resource allocation. Who knows? Like I said, episode 1 of Podcana, man, we did our best to get as much information as possible, but Ravensburger are very tight-lipped on all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about that gift set. So, again, popped up on YouTube here if you want to see, but it's 2 oversized foil cards. I know you have something to say about this, Flake, which I think is particularly interesting. 2 playable foils, 34 tokens. What the heck? And 4 boosters. So, I mean, 2 major things to unpack there. The 2 oversized foil cards and the 34 tokens. Flake, go.
Okay, so, few things. Number 1, I want to just make a quick note that there are oversized cards in this. Oversized cards in other card games have always been playable, and that sounds ridiculous. But the first card game that I've ever seen do this is not Magic; it's Star Wars CCG, and the only card that they oversized printed was the only card in the game that started on the board. So they oversized printed those, and people would go to tournaments and be like, bam, and they'd slam it down because it was hilarious and it was just fun. But it was playable. It was perfectly legal. Magic in their commander sets would release their commander decks, but they would also, in those packs that they would sell, would have oversized foil versions of the commander. So you could show up, jam it on the board, and it was hilarious, and it's just another way to play. If they're printing oversized cards in a gift set like this with a scaled down version of the card as well, because they say 2 oversized foil cards and 2 playable foil cards. So what they're saying is that you could play the small one, no problem, but the oversized card, in my opinion, is going to be something along the lines of like a quote-unquote commander or a hero card that you basically start the game with access to. It's a card that does not get shuffled in the deck. It's a card that you start on the board with. That is my suspicion.
So I will push back. Oh, it's so weird because honestly, if you zoom into this thing, because you can see the freaking tokens as well, and there's these little circular coin tokens. Maybe for flipping a coin, see who goes first. You pick the one that you like, whatever.
34.
Yeah, well, I think there's other tokens. Yeah.
Yeah.
But my pushback on the oversized cards being Commander-esque, like these cards that exist kind of outside the game that are playable, is that if you zoom in at the bottom, you can see these cards, right? You have an 8-drop, which I think is one of the highest cost cards we've seen in the form of Hades, and then you have a 5-drop of Mulan, and the card templating looks quite similar to everything else we've seen revealed so far. So it looks like. To me, it looks like these are normal cards, and this is a additional piece for a collector's item, right? Because it's a gift set. I do think you're onto something because, it doesn't make sense. I think that it feels like a weak thesis when I say it, right? It doesn't feel like enough, right? It doesn't feel like enough for me to just get these big cards so I can just have them, look at them. I like Mulan. I like Hades. It feels like they got to have a function. The only thing that pulls me away from it is when I zoom in and look at the bottom. The card template looks almost identical to what we've seen. We have an 8-drop in Hades, 5-drop Mulan, and yeah, these look like standard cards.
That's, again, without knowing the rules, speculation is basically the only wind beneath our wings to sort of go through. But I like that you mentioned that we see tokens, and 34 of them, we see 2 of them on the actual gift set itself, the Hades, or it could just be, flipping a coin to see who goes first. But if there's 34 of them, I would honestly suspect that this is a resource system. It's a way to keep track of it. There's in the next episode of Podcana, we're going to actually go into the anatomy of the cards and dig deeper into what a lot of the numbers might mean or what they might represent. But I think it's fair to say that there's going to be an attack value and a defense or health value on the cards. And I think that if you're kind of having this combat system between the cards themselves, that you're going to have to keep track of damage somehow. This is not a digital game, and keeping track of damage is an important metric and important element to how this goes. So I think that it might be a matter of like, okay, Mulan bumps into Hades. Hades takes a little bit of damage. He took 4 damage or whatever, so we'll drop 4 counters on him.
Yes, so I'm happy you mentioned that, and we'll definitely dig into that next episode, but I hope they do not have persistent damage in this game represented through tokens. That is, in my experience, that is just a very clunky system for a physical card game, is using these dice to represent dynamic life values on cards. I much prefer the Magic system where, it's either exists or it does not exist. It can have negative counters on it, but those are more niche rather than, creating the damage set. But yeah, let us know in the YouTube comments below what you think these 34 tokens are. Like what is this gift set too? Because honestly, when I look at the product, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's 4 boosters. That's effectively the only normal product you're getting. Then it's these 2 oversized cards, which who knows what the heck those are. You get these 2 foil cards, which are on the thing. It's like, can you get those foil in a normal booster pack? Like, what are these? But it seems like the main offering here is 34 tokens. And what the heck are those things?
Yeah, I mean, if they're nice tokens, if they're metallic, weighty style tokens, maybe I'll go ahead and pick something up like this again. But 4 booster packs for me is, again, like you mentioned, that's the attractive point. But we're coming from a position of, we want to play the game. We want to sit down. We want to compete. We want to, play in tournaments and really have that kind of experience. So something like the gift set is not meant for us. It's meant for perhaps the collector populace who are going to be interested in the game. This really kind of sets the tone for me that this is a game that's going to kind of be positioned much like Pokemon, because Pokemon had tons of these come out, where a new set will come out. The hardcore, try-hard, sweaty players are going to go and buy booster boxes and crack packs and buy singles, and the casual collectors who are fans of Pokemon in general, the games, the creatures, everything, the whole lore of it, are going to go ahead and buy the box set because they know what they're getting. They're looking at the box set and say, hey, my favorite Pokemon is, I don't know, Clefairy or whatever, and here's a box set that has that particular card, a foil version of it, an oversized version of it, tokens that represent that hero, or that Pokemon rather. I'm going to get that because I like that. Now, that's not to say that there's no appeal in this, because who knows, I might pick up a deck and be like, dude, Hades is my jam, and I want to bling that out. I'm going to go pick up this gift set because I want that foil Hades, I want the Hades tokens, and, I want to show up with this gigantic surfboard-sized Hades to jam on the board when I'm sitting across the table. So I'm getting a lot of vibes that Lorcana is positioning itself to really attack both ends of the card game spectrum, being competitors and collectors.
Awesome. Well, I want to get to some cards in this podcast. So let's cruise to this last product offering, which is the Illumineer's Trove. This is 1 storage box, 2 deck boxes, 8 boosters, 15 tokens, 1 guide, and then you get sleeves, deck boxes, playmats. Are those in this product, or those additional, Flake, the sleeves?
Oh no, sorry, those are additional. Those are additional things. That's my bad. But
it's the 1 storage box, the 2 deck boxes, correct, the 8 boosters, so it's a good amount of boosters. So like the main addition here is sure, I mean, the guide is pretty reasonable too, if it's like the best presentation for the rules. But the 2 deck boxes and the storage box, we see this is a very common offering in TCGs. It's kind of like a collector's thing. Some people like it, some people don't, but this is more like if you want like a Lorcana storage box, you want a Lorcana deck box, this is a way to acquire that, while you also get some booster boxes, some booster packs as well.
All right, so here's my little, like you said, you want to put on the tinfoil hat? Here's my tinfoil hat. The previous product, 15 tokens, or 34 tokens. And my assumption is that you get, 17 on each side. So 17 Mulan, 17 Hades. My guess is that the Illumineer's Trove is 15 tokens, 1 from each playable hero, quote unquote. So I think you're getting 1 Mickey, you're getting 1 Maleficent, 1 Elsa, 1 Robin Hood, 1 whatever. I don't know. Again, this is all speculation, and I know that in 10 or 15 or 20 episodes from now, we're going to look back at this episode and say we're all idiots. But at the same time, who knows? I'm shooting my shot on this, and I suspect that it's going to be 1 of each hero. But what I like about this product is that this is a kind of jump starter move to get somebody who's interested in the game and say, all right, now you got 2 deck boxes, you got the guide, and I like the guide because the guide is. When I used to play Magic, I used to get their bundles or whatever, which was 10 booster packs. You get that set's particular breakdown of all the cards, the lore behind that particular set. You get a D20 and a random stamped foil or something like that. This kind of gives me those kinds of vibes, but this one's just goes above and beyond because it also offers you a guide to the game. It offers you the deck boxes, the storage boxes. This is something I think that you're going to get somebody who might not necessarily be a card game player yet. I think that that's what this is. But I also believe that this is probably going to be the most coveted piece that people are going to buy and leave sealed and stored on their shelf as a collector's item.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's just talk about these sort of last product offerings that they've hinted at. I mean, we don't really have a lot of details on, but that's sleeves, additional deck boxes, playmats in portfolios, so binders to have your cards with room for oversized cards. Not much to say about this, but other than if a TCG is releasing with these kind of products, it's pretty impressive. Well, again, normally a TCG would release with just booster packs, just cards, see if people like the game, see where it goes. But to invest this much in these products, which are pretty hard to make, the deck boxes, the sleeves, and the playmats, it's just showing that they're really trying to hit the ground running. So I'm impressed, to be honest.
The biggest thing about this is that they're coming out of the gate with playmats. So what do you need playmats for? To play competitively. So I think that this is a thing where they have organized play in mind, and they want to already sort of tell the players hey, you want to go to a tournament, you want a Lorcana playmat, we've got you covered. And I think that that's a no-brainer for them if they're planning on supporting organized play.
So funny because you said, what do you need playmats for? And I was to just sit in my closet and fill up space. Hundreds of playmats. Yeah, which I'm sure a lot of people have. All right, Flake, let's talk about some cards. This is going to be great. I just want to go back to something too. You mentioned hero-based gameplay. So if you look at the cards, it doesn't look like that because we have these ascending and descending resource values. It looks like you're casting heroes. So I don't think it's going to be a flesh and blood version of heroes, which is good. I actually think that the Flesh and Blood hero game design is actually kind of limiting in a larger scale kind of scope. But you could have a version, because with the oversight cards, where maybe you have a card that starts as sort of a Magic the Gathering-esque commander, and then you can cast it from that zone into the game rather than having to draw it and play it. Just my 2 cents there. Let's start with the first one. Again, image on YouTube. This is going to be, we assume that this card is at common. That's why we're starting with it. So this, and I'm reading off a Lorcana card for the first time live. So I'm going to try to go from left to right, but maybe we'll figure out a better version later. But the Captain Hook, the Forceful Duelist. It's a 1 cost, 1 power, 2 defense. Is the keywords Dreamborn, villain, pirate, captain. The text on the card says Challenger +2, which means while challenging, this character gets +2 attack. I assume challenging is an assumption, but is when fighting another character effectively. And yeah, there's this little thing in the bottom right, which I don't even know what to call that. That's like a little diamond, a little pip. I don't know. DM Armada I watched his video where he was speculating on this. We have no freaking idea what that is, but it's definitely critical. It seems that the cards do ascend in, like, there's an ascending value with, like, the higher resource cost it is, the more kind of pips or diamonds, whatever you want to call it, on it. But yeah, I won't go too much into that. Your initial thoughts, Flake, and what is this? What's the element called for Captain?
Okay, so he's steel, is he not? I believe he's steel.
Steel, yes, steel.
So he's steel, which is fascinating. Challenger to me, I think, is just whenever you defend against another attack. Is what I'm anticipating here. But when I was going through the card releases on the Lorcana video that they put out, I isolated these cards because these were the cards that were actually released at like the Disney event, the Disney celebration event or whatever, but they didn't have the rarities on them. They were stamped with the Disney event. Now we have a better idea of what the rarities look like, and I suspect that the circle is the common card, but overall over here, that pip, if you want my advice of what that pip is, should I say it now, or should I save it for episode 2 when we dig into the anatomy of the cards?
No, you gotta say it now, because everybody's looking at this being like, what the heck is that thing?
All right, so my first impression was that this was sort of a evolutionary level of the card. Like, you can get another Captain Hook that maybe is 2 pip, that is a better version that you can draw and upgrade your original Captain Hook, and he kind of gets better. So a 1 pip can become a 2 pip, but you can't play a 3 pip on a 1 pip unless you have a card or something that allows you to do so or whatnot. Then the other thing I thought of, which was actually suggested by DM Armada, which I'm kind of coming around to. He said it's something along the lines of, if you defeat this character, you get this you get like a prize, or you draw a card or something like that. But then I thought differently. I thought that this is an element, I think, that is from Young Jedi, a very, very old and very, very short-lived Star Wars card game that was, again, minion combat, but when one of those minions died, there was a damage associated to it. And damage was how many cards you basically peel off the top of your card. I'm thinking that this might be like a penalty if this gets off the table. What that penalty is? Do you lose a life point or a health point or something associated to your win condition or your overall health? That is also something that I'm thinking about. There's so many wild ideas that I have, but I will say this is the one question I really wanted Lorcana to answer, and I asked them, and they were like, they specifically said, as for the pips, we are tight-lipped about this. This is the one thing that we will not share at all, and that's unfortunate for us, but I get it.
So that's actually a good hint, though, because I think that if this was like, okay, say that we had a magic base or like a magic land resource base, right? Say this was like the devotion to that color-esque that you needed to cast. Like, you needed 1 steel land to cast it. Or, like if we look at Elsa next, it has 1 pimp, but it costs 3. You can 2 resources of any color and then 1 of the purple color or whatever, the black color. I don't think that's what that is, because if that was what it was, they would tell us, and also it would be kind of boring. I think it's associated with win conditions, like you said. It's really interesting because you talk about creature-based combat. So like the way to win is killing creatures and things like that, rather than there being this external force that you're outside of creature-based combat, which is like going face, having this base life. That's interesting. I haven't played any games with that kind of game system before, but I do think that this is absolutely critical to like the core function of the game, and probably the core way that you win and lose the game, because they're being so secretive about it. I have no idea.
Well, if we think about it this way, like what you're mentioning, if you kind of, you don't necessarily have to completely take out the face aspect of it, because one of the things that people just don't like is when there's a meta where just like point, click, and throw to face. Hearthstone's had it, Magic's had it forever. Red deck wins, kind of stuff like that. I think what this might be is like, you could still have those hyper aggressive go face decks, but a lot of the things that occur in those decks is that the player who is being the aggressor will never get punished on their life total, because a lot of the work that occurs oftentimes is to take care of the creatures on the board. But if there's a penalty to those creatures dying, you don't feel as bad removing those creatures or banishing them, let's say in this game, because banishing them also does work against face. So you're getting rewarded and you're actually putting in some work in that sense. So that's why I might think that that's what it is. But, if we move down to Elsa, which I think you and I have sort of came to the conclusion that this is the uncommon rarity, as you can see at the bottom of the card. Elsa is already giving me vibes of perfectly what I want to play, which is freeze, exert an opposing character. Like, things like this are absolutely my jam. Control, slowing the game down. Elsa already feels like precisely what I want to be playing.
Yeah, so let's read it off. We'll have the image up on YouTube, but Elsa is a 3 cost. It's Prometheus as well. 2 power, 3 defense, uncommon, of course. The text says freeze, and it has what I think is a tap symbol. Exert chosen opposing character. It has 1 pip, and the sort of, I don't know what you call it, the subtext being Dreamborn, Hero, Queen, Sorcerer. Oh, interesting. 41 out of 204. I never really looked at that number.
That's the other thing I wanted to
particularly interesting.
Yeah.
That number is particularly interesting. Anyway, yeah, it does look. This is definitely a controlling S card. It is interesting because it's super 1-for-1, right? And it probably puts you behind on tempo, which makes sense because this is it's a 2/3, right? You're going to have external factors working with this, whether you're removing other creatures. You're killing other creatures with your other things on the board, or you're removing things with spells, and then you're also tapping down or exerting the most powerful thing your opponent has on the board. But yeah, look, it's kind of a signpost for black being maybe a more controlling color, or Prometheus, sorry. At the very least, right? Usually these color identities will have multiple archetypes built within them, but we do see the power level of the 3 costs. We have the text ability, which is definitely a very relevant ability, and on top of that is a 2 attack, 3 defense. I'm really interested, Flake. So in Flesh and Blood, a game that you and I are both very familiar with, people sort of cracked the mathematical code, and it's not really a secret, but there is like a fundamental like mathematical algorithm in which everything sort of is designed on, right? Most cards add up to this like magical number of 8. Some people use a different number, but it's all really the same. And from there, you can look at individual cards and sort of understand where they've had points of value subtracted, right? So like, how much is exert opposing character worth? I'm particularly interested for someone to do that with Lorcana, so we can kind of see what the average value of a card is, right? Based off the mana curve, based like what is sort of the vanilla stats, and then where do we find those cards that are potentially above rate?
Yeah, no, that's definitely metrics that are going to eventually get broken down. As much as people want to open packs and put them cards in binders, there's people who actually just want to create spreadsheets and figure out the magic numbers, right? The next card up is in the rare category. As we can surmise, it's going to be Robin Hood, Unrivaled Archer, 6 cost. It's a 4/4. It's got a bunch of game text here, including an interesting keyword called evasive, which means that they can challenge characters with evasive. This has to deal with if in Runeterra there's an evasive or evasion or evasive, elusive. That's the one. Elusive in Runeterra, where elusive characters are kind of like they're shrouded, they're stealthed. They can only be challenged by other stealthed or other, in this case, evasive characters, which is kind of on point and on brand for what Robin Hood would be.
Yeah, honestly, like there's kind of a lot of things that are jumping out at me when I read these cards that remind me of Runeterra specifically. But let's go ahead and read the text on Robin Hood here. The first line is this ability, Feed the Poor, or passive ability, that is. When you play this character, if an opponent has more cards in their hand than you, draw a card. Now that's some text right there. I love that. That's great. And then the other text here is Good Shot. During your turn, this character gains evasive. So like was saying with evasive, and it has 2 pips on it. Feed the Poor. Man, I'll tell you that that's an ability that gets me pretty excited.
Yeah, it's blue too, man. So this is like absolutely in your wheelhouse. Anytime you can, draw cards. Good friend of mine, Majin Bey, who's also a Runeterra character. Like whenever we talk about card games, he's like, dude, whatever the deck is that draws me cards, that's what I want to play. So I always feel like any catch-up mechanic is always very important. Anytime that you're falling behind and you could get value from that fall behind point, I think is awesome. A card, but like the thing about things like that is that they are very fragile. They're usually teetering on an edge. We've seen it in card games like Flesh and Blood, where a card like Awakening was the ultimate catch-up mechanic in to the degree where it was actually to your advantage to fall well behind. That is a balance I think that this card will probably get right. I mean, if you're falling behind on cards, whether it's 10 cards or 1 card, you're still drawing a card. And I think that in any card game, having access to more of your resources, more of your solutions, more of your threats is always a good thing.
So, yeah, this is just 2 for 1, right? The thing is, it costs 6. So that looks quite expensive in the context of all the cards that we've seen. Like in the example that used of Flesh and Blood, Awakening cost literally nothing, just the opportunity cost of having it in your hand and putting it in your deck. So that's why we got that bologna sandwich that was that card. But yeah, 6 costs. 6 costs is looks very expensive, but it's a great ability. Like I think it's an awesome ability. It doesn't really look. It looks less controlled. Feed the Poor is actually not a very controlling ability. It's a tempo ability, because when you play Feed the Poor, you definitely want to have less cards in your hand than your opponent, and generally that's not what controlling is do. Controlling kind of really conflicts with that. So I think that blue, at least this, is a signpost for a more tempo-based color. Yeah, Sapphire is the color. Yeah.
Whenever you have evasive, like the first thing you're thinking about is like, hey, I just don't want people to block me. I just want to be able to do what I do and make it awkward for you. I want you to have to deal with this in non-traditional ways or unorthodox ways, and then that's what it means. And I think you're right. If this is printed on the card, it's because it wants to be in a deck that is dumping its hand like relatively frequently. It wants to always play cards. It doesn't want to wait. It wants to be the protagonist here. So after that, we got. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that I'm really happy with the evasive mechanic so far. The fact that evasive, heroes cards, whatever you want to call them, can challenge each other. It's interactive, right? Like we've seen abilities in other card games that use this kind of function, but they make it non-interactive, right? So like this isn't like a Magic Gathering reference. This isn't like a True Name Nemesis or something. Like you can interact with this card, you can have cards that counter this card, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm happy to see that so far. But let's go ahead and hop into what we think is the super rare.
Yeah, the super rare is Cruela de Vil, of which you forgot her name. Incredible. She had 101 Dalmatians, and bet you can name those, but you can't name her. Cruella de Vil is a 2-drop, 1/3 stat line. She's miserable as usual, Brendan. She's a story.
Can relate to that.
She is a story-born villain, and her ability is You'll Be Sorry. And I like this. It says, when this character is challenged and banished, you may return chosen character to their player's hand. So this could be a recursion effect to rescue something you have on the board that may have a cool deploy effect. It may also just put one of their characters back into their hand. They may have spent an entire turn deploying something fat, and you just say, all right, you killed my Cruella de Vil. This goes back to your hand.
This card is actually so interesting. So we see like what is kind of like a graveyard interaction in Emerald here, which stock standard, right? But Cruella de Vil, it's like, is this card strong or not? Because this was enter the battlefield effect and you're returning, chosen card to your hand, you're kind of recurring your most powerful card, recurring your win condition. That would be good. This character is challenged and banished. So I think your opponent has the ability to just not interact with it and take the 1 damage.
Yes.
And we talked about, minion combat, right? Minions attacking minions. This idea of being challenged is interesting, right? Because then I think that hints more towards like going face than it does towards like attacking a minion. Because if you attack a minion, does it challenge you back? And does your opponent, are they challenging or are they not when you're getting attacked? It's only if you interfere with another minion. So I think that's actually pointing towards like a, this omnipotent player being entity that exists as like the life total you're trying to take down. Like that's what you're attacking. But yeah, Cruella de Vil, super powerful ability. It looks like your opponent can actually avoid it and just take the 1 damage. So maybe you equip some equipment on this. So we haven't seen the equipment yet, but make it more powerful. Make your opponent sort of pay for not interacting.
Well, that's the payoff, right? It's like, okay, like there's a very detrimental effect to it if you do want to get rid of it, but ultimately you're just getting poked over and over and over again. Finally, there's the legendary category of rarity, as we see here on Maleficent. But this is a fat 9 drop. So Hades wasn't that big at 8. I mean, it was pretty big, but 9, I think, is the biggest that we've got over here. It's a 7/5. What we see on the card here, it's a 7/5 monstrous dragon, storyborn villain dragon. 2 pips. Got the nice golden sort of rarity stamp that we suspect is legendary. But the game text for this one, Brendan, says Dragonfire. When you play this character, you may banish chosen character. It just eats something.
Yeah, straight up 2 for 1 indiscriminately. It's funny because we'll talk about it in the next episode, but there's also a spell that does the same effect. Like Dragonfire is a card as well. But Maleficent, or gosh, it's a hard name for me to say. It's just like straight up 2 for 1. This is a great card. It's pretty expensive at 9. I have no idea like the consistency at which games will go to that 9 resource and how frequently you can deploy a card like this and at what cost. But certainly powerful in terms of raw stats and ability, and makes sense in red, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's one of those decks that are probably just going to be like, we'll play relatively defensively, and once we get past the big stuff comes out, and that's where spells like Dragonfire that we'll see in the next episode are going to come into play. Again, our access to everything is rather limited. As things come out, we'll be able to sort of get a clearer picture on stuff. But those are the cards and the rarities, or at least some of the cards and the rarities, so we can sort of peel the curtain back a little bit. The other stuff that we know about, Brendan, unless you want to, anything else you want to sort of dig in on?
So the last thing I want to dig on, and I know it's for next episode, but I gotta get into it. There's a pretty clear dichotomy between some of the cards we talked about, and that's that they are they're sort of subtext. They're either Dreamborn or Storyborn at this point, and they're either a hero or a villain at this point. So those are going to be key sort of subtypes. I have no idea how they will play out, but it's like Storyborn or Heroborn, villain or hero, and then we get into like the actual creature type, like it's a dragon or it's a pirate or something like that. So I have a feeling that you might have some deck building restrictions, or at least you'll have payoffs for being like full Dreamborn or maybe full Storyborn, or just like heroes and villains, something like that. Just something to think about as we lead into episode 2.
Yeah, I don't want to dig too deep into it because episode 2 is going to be pretty ripe with more speculation as we dig more into the anatomy of the cards, what things might mean, decipher some of the clues. But the last little bit over here is I want to talk about organized play. And we know that they are going to have an organized play. And one of the questions that I asked Disney Lorcana that they were gracious enough to respond to is that organized play will be announced and sort of fleshed out in the spring. So we are not terribly far away from it. We're still a couple months away. But for a product that's launching in August, to have an organized play structure announced is pretty significant. And I think that that's important because, you want to sell product, but you also want to keep people engaged and thriving well beyond just opening their cases and ripping packs.
Yeah, and it's something to speculate about, but organized play is a very, very broad spectrum, right? So I was actually pretty surprised to see organized play mentioned at all. When I first was exposed to Lorcana, I thought it would be, completely casual, like very focused on tabletop, kind of pick up and play, but it does not look like that so far. But speaking to the spectrum of organized play, it can be organized play in terms of they're supporting local game stores. You should reasonably expect, if you're in a densely populated area, to have like a weekly thing to play the game for. But my question is like the big tournaments, like is Disney Lorcana Worlds, Disney Lorcana like regionals, qualifiers, et cetera, because that's when it gets really, really exciting. I don't want to get too ahead of myself because those things are not necessarily beneficial for a game. The game design might not lend itself to that sort of competition. But for me as a player, with them talking about organized play, putting this much of an emphasis on it, seems like they're going to have some top end of competitive play.
But let's be real, man. Again, you and I are coming at this from the perspective of we're broadcasters. You're a pro player as well. We have stakes in this from a selfish perspective of we want there to be a big deal because we love it. We love consuming it. We love being involved in it. I think that, Disney has all the structure to make this freaking awesome. When you're talking about Disney worlds, you're talking about actual Disney World. You're actually talking about Disney World in Orlando or whatnot. You're talking about this from the entire perspective of, dude, how great would it be? It's November, whatever, and we're all in Disneyland because there's the World Championships where they got all the regional winners or all the national champions that come in, and it's this grandiose thing, and it's really cool. Now, obviously, we don't know the spectrum or the scope of which they want to promote this, but they have gone on record saying that there will be an organized play structure. Now, whether that's just little local tournaments that they're going to send, prize kits to the LGSs for, or if it's a grander scheme where they're like, hey, we've got a $25,000, major going on in, in Philadelphia or whatever, where people are going to drive out and play. That's yet to be seen. But I kind of think that if they're doing organized play, they're not going to half-ass it. I think that they're going to go for the whole enchilada.
So I think the whole enchilada is just a little bit of a labor of love, to be honest. When it comes to bottom line, it comes to profitability, at least short-term profitability, those big tournaments that really just cater to the 1%. I'm not talking 1% sort of skill. I'm talking 1% in the terms of people that want to engage in that terms of thing. I think that we've seen card games now in recent history tend to cut that out. You look at Magic, and it's a lot of its success comes from tabletop. It comes from the casual scene. I think that those things are not conducive to that. Weekly tournaments, they are. So I think that those are going to be there no matter what, at least on a local scene. It really depends on Ravensburger and what they want to do with this, because I talked about short-term profitability, but that doesn't necessarily equate to long-term profitability. And I think that marketing is in building this sort of history and this media for your game, which is what these large tournaments do. They build narratives, they build players, they give things, people something to aspire to when they pick up the game, a sort of an end game, a long-term investment. I think that's critical to a game's sort of success in the long run. I think that, we've seen some TCGs shy away from that to look more at the short term. I hope that Lorcana does go for that long-term route, does give us that top-end OP structure. But it really depends on Ravensburger, because I think that at least initially, at least on launch, that would definitely be, if they were going to make it happen, it would be because they want to, not because it's going to generate the most money, in my opinion.
All right. Lots to be discovered still for everybody, us included. We're eagerly awaiting any little tidbits of information that drop. You can be sure now, if we do hear something, you will also know. So now's a good time to also just sort of go ahead and plug our Twitter account. You can go to @Podcana and on Twitter and make sure that you're well plugged into that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and all that jazz. But we've got listener questions, Brendan. Already, a lot of people are really eager about this. We got a lot of them. If you don't hear your question on this episode, it's likely because we're saving it for the next episode. Ultimately, thank you to everybody who submitted your questions. It really means a lot to us. So we're going to go through some of these, Brendan. You can start us off.
Yeah, so this is one that I kind of answered, but we can just, I want to get Flake's opinion on it too. I think I maybe know it, but maybe you can flesh it out a bit more. And this comes from D-Root. David Root, actually Magic the Gathering Pro Tour champion and person who whipped my butt on camera, which I will never live down. D-Root says, what would you expect / be happy with as far as organized play for Lorcana in 2024? I have no idea how serious they will take OP for this game. So I definitely just went on a little rant, but I would say for me personally as a player, I would actually like to see a system similar to what Flesh and Blood is doing right now. I really love the ability to play the game at a regional level as your first step up to big competition. And then for these bigger tournaments that are scattered kind of throughout the United States or throughout the world, just they're somewhat local to, like the calling structure, like the Grand Prix, and hopefully a top end or something like World Championships. I'm willing to, I'd be okay if they sort of foregoed all of the regional stuff, because I know it's definitely a hassle, and just had a World Championship. That would be great. But a robust pro system I know that would have pretty much everybody I know chomping at the bit. But Flake, what are you hoping for?
All right, so again, perfectly selfish on my end here, but I want something where on the lowest end you have something akin to Friday Night Magic, where there's, go out there, it's casual, it's meant for new players to test the waters to see if they like playing the game against other people that they don't know. I want a monthly, somewhere around the world, major tournament, something calling-esque once a month. I don't know how they can sustain it, where it would be, but I want something big like that, where those tournaments allocate things like ELO, and you have a rating system associated with that. I want a tier 3 thing, which is kind of like a national championship to a degree, and then I want a world. I want like the whole shebang to be a world championship. I've never been a pro when it comes to card games. I've qualified for pro status in Flesh and Blood, but as a broadcaster, I've always preferred to be behind, in front of the camera instead of playing the card game. So I don't know. I've never really experienced pro play, so I don't know how outlandish that is, or if it even fits. Dave Rude has been a Magic pro for a long time. He's been a Flesh and Blood pro for as long as I've known him. So he would know a better structure to me. But in my opinion, I want to know that I can go to my LGS. Dave Rude from Harry Tarantula in Toronto, that's where I go and play. I want to know that I can go to Harry Tarantula every, let's say, Thursday and be like, all right, I'm going to go there at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. There's going to be a Lorcana thing. I could win a promo card. I could win some packs, whatever, go home, feel good. I also want to know that every month that I can look at a calendar and say, hey, there's a $10,000 or $20,000 tournament going on in Miami or in Philadelphia or in Los Angeles or something that, maybe I want to go out there and check it out or something like that. Or there's one, maybe they have one in Europe too, in Asia or whatever. I want that as well. But I also want something where it's like, I want to go ahead and I want to try to be the national champion. And who knows, maybe there's a world champion. I think for a first year, I think that they're probably in a boat where they might test it out, because every card game that comes out now has $1 million prize purse associated to their first year, it seems.
They're very incentivized to come in and just dunk on Magic.
Yeah.
I don't mean that to get anybody angry who likes Magic, is playing Magic. I also play Magic. But it does seem like a lot of card games that come out, Magic the Gathering kind of has really cut back on its competitive play, its organized play, and its larger tournament scene. Just comes in and kind of is just like, okay, boom, we're doing what Magic used to do. Come play our game, travel the world, all that. And it gets a lot of people really excited because people miss that. So yeah, I also would not be surprised that if they came to market with that strategy, because I think it's great PR too. I think it's fantastic PR. And it seems like Ravensburger is kind of positioning themselves to do that.
All right. We're winding down in terms of time, but we're going to get through one or two more. Let's see. Here's a very easy peasy one. This one's from Keith Bartram of Realm Games, a good friend and a great community advocate for card games, saying, what characters do you hope get released first? Well, we've seen some of them. Brendan, you've got your Robin Hood, but you don't have your Mowgli yet.
I need my Mowgli, you're right. But I think Mowgli might not land in the colors that I need him to land in. Lorcana's a game where I think that the art's beautiful, the characters are really cool and iconic, but I'm more interested in play styles, right? Like I want the way that I enjoy playing TCGs to sort of be an option or be facilitated in the game. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most, is to have flushed out archetypes of aggro, mid-range, control, and maybe a little combo, and derivatives of that, of course, because that's what gets me excited as someone who's looking at a game, looking at a potential meta, and trying to sort of express myself and maybe break that meta, win some tournaments. Who knows?
I'm always fall back to the fact that it's like, just give me a Han Solo deck and I don't care what the hell it is. Again, the fact that Disney bought Star Wars IP, in my head, as that just opened the door for me. That's a whole other podcast episode down the line. I think that of the characters we see now, a Buzz Lightyear. I think Buzz Lightyear would be pretty badass. I think that would be kind of cool. A lot of space-esque type things. I think it's the closest to Star Wars as I think I'm going to get, based off of the standard Disney fare. So that's what
I'm noticing a trend here.
Yeah, dude, space is rad, man. Space is awesome. I just want space-related stuff. Let's do one more, Brendan, and you can pick.
All right, so we've got Capolo here. Why should I, a semi-competitive card gamer that is impartial to Disney, get into Lorcana? I think that's a fantastic question because, I've been in those shoes, right? I was in those shoes with Marvel Snap. I was very, very impartial to the Marvel universe. This might be a huge spoiler to some people who listen to that podcast, but I actually had negative interest in the IP. I actually didn't like it, which I know is probably blasphemy at this point, but I think that if you look at Lorcana, you look at how they're setting up to release, we've talked about it throughout the pod, like they're doing this right. And I look at these cards and I look at the design and it just looks so calculated and so set up to just be an amazing game, right? And if you're a semi-competitive card gamer, it's because you enjoy the aspect of playing trading card games. You enjoy playing against people. You enjoy that part of it. And I think that Lorcana will facilitate that. It doesn't mean you got to go pick up 1 million booster boxes and have every single card or, be trying to chase the market and all that other silly stuff that comes with these TCGs. But I think that Lorcana looks like that game that you can go and have fun on a weekly basis at your local game store. And then hopefully, like me and Flake both want, play some larger tournaments and, aspire to some sort of bigger things or, like a longer form version of what we would consider to be the end game of Lorcana.
I'm going to answer you, Capolo. First of all, Capolo, great guy. I'm going to answer you very, very candidly here. Why should you get into it if you're impartial to Disney? Why should you get into Lorcana? I would say you should probably wait, in all honesty. I like Disney. I'm a fan of card games, obviously. I wanted to get into this card game because I like Disney, and I know that if Disney's getting involved with something, it's probably because the quality of it has been vetted and reviewed, and it's going to be great. That said, you might feel differently. If you have no attachment to the characters, to the lore, or any of that, there's a good option for you to say, well, like a lot of people will get into a game because they just like the characters that are involved in it, or they'll buy a book, or watch a movie or a TV rendition of a video game because they liked what came prior to it. If you don't like that, then the only thing that might appeal to you is the gameplay and the mechanics, and we don't know what that is yet. So it's hard for me to sell the game to somebody who's just looking for a good card game to play when we don't know what all the mechanics are. What I will say is, based on what we've seen from the cards, as limited as it is, it seems that there's enough there that between the various color palettes, the keywords we're seeing, some of those mechanics, some of these mystery little emblems and pips and whatever, I suspect that it's going to be deep enough that there will be engaging gameplay, there will be layered gameplay, lots of decision-heavy gameplay that will appeal to like, think about like Hearthstone. Hearthstone's selling point is deceptively simple, but like ridiculously difficult to a degree. And I kind of get that because when you pick up Hearthstone, you think it's the easiest thing in the world. I thought the same thing about Flesh and Blood, but once you get into the nitty gritty of it, you're realizing, wow, this is more than just trading damage. There's so much more under the surface. And I feel that with Lorcana, and I mean that genuinely. I'm not saying that because I'm on a Lorcana podcast. I'm saying that because I truly mean that. I wouldn't make this podcast if I didn't believe that with what I'm saying. So my advice to you is not to blindly go ahead and throw your wallet at this. My advice to you is just wait for more information to come out. Wait for the rule set to come out, for more cards to come out. And if you like the gameplay, then definitely get into it. Absolutely. This isn't, I don't think that this is this is obviously not a scam in any way. This is definitely a card game that I think that people will compete in, collect with, and just, really dive into head first. Yeah.
And I would probably reiterate off that I would consider myself pretty much impartial to the Disney IP. Like, there is some nostalgia, I guess, but I'm just one of those, like, I'm a little bit hardcore on the card gamer end, where it's like the nice art, it's icing on the cake, but the gameplay is pretty much what I'm interested in. And just walking through these cards, it looks like it will be there. But you can just sit back, and we're gonna get tons more information before it finally comes out. Anyway, Flake, let's go ahead and close that out. If you want to submit your question to be read out on the pod, just go ahead and shoot it down in the YouTube comments below. I'm also very interested to hear your opinion on what the heck the pips are. Please tell me. Someone get us some insider information. I need to know what that is right now. Flake and I are both on Twitter. Flake is located at WatchFlake. I'm at BrendanAPG. We are aiming. So with the Podcana, it's gonna be interesting because this will be a weekly podcast. But to start out, we'll probably be a bit more spaced out as the information trickles out. We do have all the way until August till we finally get those cards in our hand. Flake, anything from you before we close out episode 1?
Nothing. I'm just excited for this. Again, if you're listening to this and you like the podcast, please subscribe, follow us on Twitter, support us in that way. Again, the best way that you can support us, obviously, is just listening to us. But we'll come up with better ways that you can do that. But for now, we're just happy that you joined us for our launch of this awesome experience.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.